Welcome to Elena, Storyteller, a place where novels, love stories, social psychology, and timeless sayings are retold with deep emotions. Join Elena to listen, empathize, and embark on the emotional journey of today's story.
There are families that, seen from the outside, seem perfect. But behind closed doors, they are nothing more than sharp fragments of the past, glued together by silence and pain. Kate, a woman who appears to have it all, a loving husband, 2 well-behaved children, and a peaceful lakeside home. Yet inside her heart lies an emptiness that nothing can fill, a hollow carved out by wounds from a childhood that never truly healed. Her mother, Bertie, is strong but distant, a woman who has spent a lifetime hiding behind lies, regrets, and the solitude she herself created. And then, one fateful summer, Kate returns to the island where her family once lived. There, 3 generations of women, grandmother, mother, and daughter, are drawn into a chain of unexpected events. Buried secrets resurface, unspoken words cut like knives, and when the truth finally comes to light, no one remains the same. Heartbroken is not just the story of a family. It's a whisper about guilt, forgiveness, and the ways we learn to love again, even after being shattered beyond repair. Because sometimes, to find your heart again, you must first let it break. Broken Heart. Chapter 1. The Island of Memories. The morning over Lake Henderson was calm, still as a mirror. Mist floated above the water, blurring the trees along the shore where dew still clung to the leaves like crystal. A small wooden boat cut through the quiet surface, leaving behind ripples that spread outward, then vanished. Kate sat silently at the bow, her fingers gripping the cold edge of the boat. The air carried the damp scent of pine and the earthy tang of the lake, smells that made her heart ache with something she couldn't name. 20 years. 20 years since she had last left this place, in tears and in anger. Her mother's letter had contained only 12 words. Come home, Kate. There are things you need to know before it's too late. No explanation, no apology, nothing but those words written in a familiar slanted hand, slightly trembling, yet still stubbornly firm. The old ferryman, with sun-darkened skin and hair like silver threads, broke the silence. Are you sure, miss? No one's gone back to that island for years. Mrs. Bertie, she's lived there alone for as long as I can remember. Kate nodded slightly, her eyes fixed on the fog ahead. I know, I'm her daughter. The old man paused, surprised, then said nothing more. Everyone around here knew who Bertie Holloway was: beautiful, proud, and distant. A woman people respected, but feared a little too. When the boat reached the dock, Kate stepped onto the weathered planks. They creaked under her feet, as if protesting her return. Everything was the same: the moss-covered path, the ferns brushing her knees, the wooden house sitting quietly at the edge of the forest. Standing before it, she felt a storm of memories rush back. The bright summer mornings, her father's laughter as he spun her around in the yard, and the nights when her mother's typewriter clattered endlessly behind a closed door, while Kate waited outside for a hug that never came. Her hand trembled as she pushed open the door. It groaned on its hinges. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and time. Dust lay thinly over the furniture, the bookshelves, the picture frames. On the wall still hung the old family portrait: Bertie in a white dress, her husband beside her, and little Kate smiling wide, unaware that happiness could shatter so quickly. Then came the sound of soft footsteps from the kitchen. A voice, low, rough, but still sharp. So you came. Kate turned. Bertie stood in the doorway, thinner than Kate remembered, her short silver hair catching the dim light. Her gray eyes were faded now, but still deep, the kind that seemed to see through everything. Between them, lay 20 years of silence. "Mother," Kate whispered, her voice breaking. Birdie didn't answer right away. She poured herself a cup of tea, steam rising and curling in the light. "You still remember the way home," she said flatly. "Good." Kate swallowed hard. "You sent for me. I'm here. What do you want from me?" Birdie's gaze lingered on her daughter's face, a face that resembled the man she had lost. For a second, pain flickered across her features. "I need you to hear some things, before I no longer have the strength to speak." The air in the room thickened. Outside, the soft lap of water against the shore blended with the sigh of wind through the cracks. Kate looked around. It felt as if everything here was closing in, wrapping her in memories she wasn't ready to face. "After all these years, now you want to talk," she said bitterly. "When I grew up in silence, when Dad left, when I begged you to tell me why everything fell apart, you said nothing." Birdie set her cup down, her hands trembling slightly. "Because I couldn't," she whispered. "I couldn't speak, couldn't love, couldn't forgive, not even myself." The words froze Kate in place. Never, not once, had she heard her mother admit weakness. "I want you to stay a few days," Birdie said softly. "There are things I can't take to the grave." Then she turned away, leaving Kate standing in the quiet. The late sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on the old family photo. The wind stirred the curtains, and for a moment, her father's smiling face seemed to move faint, sorrowful. Kate sat down, heart heavy. She didn't know whether to stay or go. But deep inside, a small, wounded part of her, the part that still longed to understand, to be loved, told her to stay. Outside, dusk settled. The lake turned bronze in the fading light. Birds flew toward the forest, their cries echoing like a call from the past. And in that stillness, Kate heard a voice within her whisper. "It's time to face it." She lifted her eyes toward the window. The reflection of the sunset shimmered in her tears, glowing like a tiny flame. The island that once felt peaceful now seemed strange, alive, as though it were holding hundreds of secrets, waiting to be told. Chapter 2: The Mother of Storms. The first morning on Henderson Island was not the peaceful one Kate had imagined. The sky was gray, clouds stretched thick over the lake. The wind moaned through the pines, a low, mournful sound like the earth itself sighing. Kate woke to the damp scent of wood and thyme. Her childhood room was unchanged. The creaky bed, the dusty window, the faded floral curtains. On the windowsill sat an old music box. She opened it gently, and the first notes of Clair de Lune filled the air. Her chest tightened. It was a gift from her father when she turned 10. He had told her, "When you're sad, listen to it. It'll remind you that every storm passes." But the storm inside her had never passed. Down in the kitchen, Birdie was making tea. Morning light glimmered faintly over her silver hair. Her back was straight, her movements calm, yet there was loneliness in every gesture. Kate stood at the doorway, watching her mother before speaking softly. "You're up early." Birdie didn't turn. "Old people don't sleep deeply," she replied. "The rain woke me last night." Her voice was flat, emotionless. But as Kate came closer, she noticed the slight tremor in her mother's hands as she poured the tea. "Are you all right, Mom?" Birdie set the pot down and gave a faint smile. "I'm used to being alone." The simple words stabbed at Kate's heart. She pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Their eyes met, separated by a silence as thick as fog. "Why did you call me back?" Kate asked quietly. "It's been 20 years. You never once reached out, no letters, no calls." Birdie exhaled, her gaze drifting toward the window. "You wouldn't understand. When someone loses the most precious thing they have, silence becomes the only language left. And what was that precious thing? Birdie turned back, her eyes glistening. You and your father. The room fell utterly still. Kate said nothing. Each word from her mother cut deep, painful, yet somehow true. Dad left because of you, didn't he? She finally asked, her voice shaking. Everyone said so, that he couldn't live with your coldness. Birdie closed her eyes. A tear slipped quietly into her teacup. Maybe, but you don't know. I was the one who drove him away. You drove him away, Kate stared. Why? Because he hurt me, and I, in my pride and anger, couldn't bear to admit my own fault. I chose pride over love, and that was my greatest mistake. Her voice trembled. For the first time in her life, Kate saw her mother fragile, like a candle flickering before it goes out. That evening, they sat on the porch overlooking the misty lake. The crickets sang softly in the grass, just as they had years ago. Do you remember how we used to sit here at night? Birdie asked. I remember, Kate said quietly. But you never told me stories, you just stayed silent. A sad smile crossed Birdie's lips. I never learned how to tell stories. I learned to survive by keeping quiet. When your father died, I thought silence would protect you from pain. But it didn't, Mom, Kate whispered. Your silence broke me instead. I grew up believing I wasn't enough, that I wasn't worth loving. Birdie's eyes softened with regret. I know, and I realized it too late. They said nothing more. The lake murmured softly beneath the darkening sky. That night, rain fell again. The sky turned black and thunder cracked across the water. Kate stood by the window, watching. She remembered how, as a child, she'd hide under the table during storms, while her mother sat calmly by the window, staring into the rain, unflinching. Back then, Kate thought her mother was fearless. Now she knew better. Birdie had simply learned to hide her fear well. Mom, Kate said suddenly, her voice firm but gentle. If there's something you need to tell me, I'm ready to hear it. Birdie nodded slowly. She rose, went into her room, and returned with an old wooden box. Its lock was rusted, its surface coated in dust. In here, she said, setting it on the table, are things I never had the courage to say. What things? Letters, Birdie replied. Ones I wrote to you, to your father, to myself. Each one holds a piece of the truth. She opened the lid. Inside lay a bundle of yellowed envelopes tied together with a faded ribbon. The scent of old ink and paper drifted up, heavy with memory. She handed one envelope to Kate. Read it, but not tonight, when you're ready. Why not now? Because the truth, Birdie said quietly, if it comes too soon, can destroy a heart. Kate gripped the envelope tightly. The handwriting on it tilted slightly, just as she remembered. To my daughter, the one I've hurt the most. A flash of lightning illuminated Birdie's face, weary, sorrowful, yet strangely peaceful. In that light, she looked like a lost soul finally finding its way home after a lifetime of storms. That night, Kate couldn't sleep. The rain drummed against the roof, steady as a heartbeat. She sat by the small lamp, turning the letter over in her hands, her thoughts a storm of fear and longing. And in the rhythm of the rain, she could almost hear her father's voice, soft and distant. My little girl, forgiveness is the only way to keep living. Kate closed her eyes. The first tear fell silently. Outside, the rain continued to fall like memories dropping into the lake, dissolving, disappearing, one by one. Chapter 3, Echoes of the Unspoken. Rain had been falling since dawn. On the surface of the lake, ripples formed and disappeared, as if someone were tapping out the rhythm of a nameless sorrow. Kate sat in the old kitchen, where the smell of coffee mingled with damp wood and the smoky scent of rain drifting through the window. She opened the worn leather journal Bertie had left on the shelf, its edges yellowed, its cover cracked with age. On the very first page, written in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Do not judge another until you know what they have sacrificed to survive." Kate read it slowly, each word landing in her chest like a distant echo. Bertie, the mother who always seemed as cold and unyielding as stone, had once been a woman who loved with reckless abandon. Within those faded pages emerged a younger Bertie, impulsive, free, and heartbreakingly fragile. She had loved a man who was never truly hers, a man who came and went like a storm, a man Bertie never forgot and never forgave herself for loving. Kate turned to the page where Bertie had written, "The day you were born, I saw his eyes, that same look, in your tiny face. I was afraid that you would become like me, that you would live in torment as I once did." Kate's hands trembled. All the years of distance, of cold glances from her mother that felt like rejection, now shimmered with a new light. It wasn't hatred. It was fear, deep, aching fear. The door creaked open. Bertie stood there, her gray hair tousled, raindrops still clinging to her shoulders. Her eyes rested on the journal in Kate's hands, then closed briefly, as if she had long known this moment would come. "You've read it." Her voice was hoarse, weary. "Yes," Kate whispered. "Mother, did you love someone before Dad?" Bertie looked out the window. Outside, the rain kept falling, each drop heavy as a confession. "There are some things," she said softly, "that, if I could choose again, I wish I had never known." "Do you regret it?" Bertie gave a faint, bitter smile. "Regret doesn't erase the past. It only forces you to relive it every single day." In that fragile silence, between the sound of rain and their trembling breaths, past and present merged, quietly, painfully, but undeniably real. Kate wanted to say she understood, that she forgave, that perhaps all her mother had ever tried to do was protect her in the only clumsy way she knew how. But the words caught in her throat. Only tears fell, mingling with the rain beyond the porch. Bertie sat beside her daughter, her frail, time-worn hand resting gently over Kate's, warm, trembling, human. "I once thought silence could make everything fade," Bertie murmured. "But silence isn't salvation, child. It's a prison." Kate held her mother's hand, feeling the calluses, the scars of a life spent fighting loneliness. "I'm afraid too, Mom. Afraid I'll become like you, living in a house full of people, yet still feeling alone." Bertie smiled faintly. "Then don't be like me. Love, even if it breaks you. Speak, even if it hurts. Because only when you dare to speak will your heart stop beating in silence." That night, Kate sat alone by the window, watching her mother's shadow flicker in the dim yellow light. The rain had stopped, but inside her, a new storm had begun. She thought of her husband, of their 2 children sleeping far away, and of herself, a woman so obsessed with perfection that she'd forgotten what she'd lost along the way. Perhaps love and forgiveness both begin with the courage to face the truth, even when it shatters you. Kate closed her eyes, listening to the soft rhythm of waves on the shore, and in her dreams, she saw herself standing between 2 women, Bertie and her own daughter, 3 generations, 3 broken hearts, all learning how to love again. There are things we never say, yet they speak for us, each time our hearts ache with the memory. Chapter 4, The Summer of Truth. That morning, the lake glittered under the sunlight, yet a gray cloud lingered in Kate's heart. She sat by the window, staring at the endless sky. The house by the lake, once her childhood refuge, now felt like a box filled with secrets. Each wall seemed to whisper something she wasn't ready to hear. Bertie had gone to the market early. The old engine coughed to life, then faded into the mist, leaving behind the smell of gasoline and a heavy silence. Kate sat alone, the journal on the table before her, and 1,000 questions swirling in her mind. She opened to the final pages. The handwriting was hurried, uneven, as if written in fear. If the day ever comes when you know everything, don't hate me. Understand that everything I did was to protect you in my own way. Kate read it over and over. Protect me from what? From whom? Something inside her whispered that the truth wasn't confined to those pages. That afternoon, Bertie returned. On the table sat a simple meal, grilled fish, boiled vegetables, and a glass of old wine. They ate in silence. Only the faint clink of silverware broke the stillness, like the slow rhythm of a sorrowful song. "Mom," Kate said softly, "the man in your journal, who was he?" Bertie's hand froze. Her gaze dropped to her plate and her fingers trembled. "You don't need to know," she replied quietly. "But I do, because I believe everything you've done, everything you've hidden, began with him." Bertie lifted her eyes. Something shattered within them, not anger, but a long-buried pain. "All right," she said. "If you really want to know, then listen." She was 19 that summer. The air thick with heat, the dirt roads glowing red under the sun, the scent of salt and oil drifting from the docks. Bertie worked at her parents' small inn, serving travelers and fishermen. And then he appeared, a stranger with a deep, calm voice, a careless smile, and eyes as sad as a rainy night. His name was Thomas. He said he'd only stay a few days, but he came back every day just for coffee and to hear Bertie talk. "Love came lightly then," Bertie said, her voice trembling, "but when it left, it took everything with it." She loved Thomas wildly, foolishly, until the day she discovered he had a wife and a small child waiting in another town. "I ran away," she whispered, "with a broken heart and a tiny life growing inside me." Kate's breath caught, her heart pounded. "You mean me?" Bertie nodded, her gaze drifting into the distance. "I thought hiding it was better. I was afraid that if you knew, you despise me. Afraid that saying it out loud would make me remember everything I was trying to forget." Kate couldn't speak. Every word from her mother was a blade cutting deep into her heart. The distance between them, all those silent years, was nothing but the scar of an unspoken truth. "I spent my whole life thinking you didn't love me," Kate whispered. "But you were just running from your past." Bertie let out a trembling laugh, tears glistening on her wrinkled cheeks. "Yes, I ran, but the more I ran, the more I lost you. I thought I was protecting you from the wound, but I became the wound myself." The kitchen fell silent. Only the ticking of the clock filled the air, while outside, the sunset painted long red streaks across the lake. That night, Kate couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch, the moonlight shimmering on the water. She thought of her husband, her children, and realized something that struck her cold. Every woman in her family had lived the same fear. Fear of pain, fear of loss, fear of loving too much. Bertie had fled from love. Kate had buried herself in perfection, and her 16-year-old daughter, Leela, was already learning to shut her heart, inheriting her mother's silence like an unwanted legacy. Kate closed her eyes, a tear falling into the cool night air. If we keep silent, the past will keep repeating through the very ones we love. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, Kate knew what she had to do. She needed to find Thomas, or at least learn what had become of him. Not to blame, but to end the silence that had haunted them both. Bertie protested sharply. "Digging up the past never brings peace, Kate." Kate met her gaze steadily. "But burying it doesn't either. I need the truth, not to judge, but to understand you, to understand myself." Bertie was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded, her tired eyes softening. "Then go, Kate. Go find the answers I never had the courage to seek." Kate packed her bags. Before leaving the lake house, she turned back to look at her mother, standing in the doorway, a cup of cold coffee in her hand, small but unbreakable. "Mom," Kate said gently, "no matter what happened, I know you never stopped loving me." Bertie smiled faintly. "A mother's love isn't always right. Mine was the kind that hurt. Yours must be better." As Kate's car disappeared down the road by the lake, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying a sound like a soft farewell. The lake shimmered under the sun, beautiful, yet unbearably sad. Because some summers don't just burn the skin, they scorch the things we once thought had long grown cold. Chapter 5: The Journey to Find a Father's Shadow. Kate's car rolled away from the lakeside, leaving behind the small wooden house, slowly dissolving into the morning mist. The road off the island curled like a ribbon of gray silk, winding through rows of crimson maple trees. Every turn, every shudder of the tires made her heart tighten, a mixture of anticipation and fear. For years, she had lived without knowing half of her own bloodline. Now that the truth had awakened, there was no turning back. She had to go, even if what awaited her at the end of the road was not comfort, but another wound. Forgotten traces. Bertie hadn't said much, but in her journal, she had left behind a name, an old address, and a few faded photographs. In one of them, a man named Thomas stood beside a fishing boat, smiling gently, his deep eyes filled with distance. On the back of the photo, a crooked line of handwriting read, "Summer of 1989, the memory of a fool." Kate followed the address to a small coastal town in Maine. The air there was unlike anywhere she'd known. The tang of sea salt, the smell of grilled seafood, and the rhythmic sound of waves crashing against rocks, like the ocean's quiet greeting. She stopped in front of an old cafe by the harbor, the one mentioned in the journal. The weathered wooden sign still bore the name, Harbor Light Cafe, standing like a silent witness to time. When she stepped inside, a bell chimed softly. An elderly woman with silver hair was wiping tables. Upon hearing Thomas's name, she froze for a moment, then sighed. "Thomas, yes, I remember him, but that was a long, long time ago." Kate's chest constricted. "Is he still alive?" The woman shook her head. "No one knows for sure. He left town nearly 20 years ago. Some say he moved to Portland. Others say he went out to sea and never came back." A cold gust blew through the door, the taste of salt lingering on Kate's lips. She thanked the woman and walked out, her heart heavy. Signs in the dark. That night, Kate rented a small room near the docks, bare, with only a bed, a desk, and a window overlooking the sea. Outside, waves pounded relentlessly, echoing like the heartbeat of someone long gone. She opened her laptop and searched for any trace of Thomas. Hundreds of results appeared, none a match. Then, as if guided by an unseen hand, she stumbled upon an old newspaper article. "Captain Thomas C. Ward missing at sea, Cape Elizabeth, 2006. No body recovered." Kate's breath caught, missing, not dead, which meant there was still a chance. She read the article over and over. One detail made her pause, the name of Thomas's son, Daniel Ward. If Thomas was her father, then Daniel was her half-brother. She copied the address listed in the article, a small boat repair shop in Portland. She knew what she had to do. Stranger yet familiar. The next morning, she drove 4 hours along the coast. Portland appeared through a veil of fog, seagulls circling above the harbor. The shop, Ward and Sons, was tucked between two warehouses, reeking of oil and varnish. A tall man in his 40s, sun-browned and steady-handed, was bent over an engine, wrench in hand. "Excuse me," Kate said softly. "Are you Daniel Ward?" He looked up. His eyes met hers, steady, cautious, searching. "Yes, who's asking?" "My name is Kate," she began, her voice trembling. "I'm looking for my father, Thomas Ward." Daniel froze, then slowly set his wrench down, wiping his hands on a rag. "Your father," he echoed. Who's your mother?" Bertie Hayes." Silence. Then Daniel turned toward the window, gazing out at the wide, endless sea. "I know that name," he murmured. "He used to mention her." Kate's heart pounded. So, is he still alive? Daniel didn't answer immediately. After a long pause, he said quietly, "I don't know, but if you want, I can tell you the end of his story." Memories from the sea. They sat in a small back room, lit by a single yellow bulb. Daniel opened a cabinet and pulled out an old wooden box. Inside were photographs, letters, and a worn notebook. "My father, Thomas, was a man who could never stand still," Daniel said. "He loved the sea so much he couldn't live away from it. After my mother died of cancer, he lost his reason to stay. He sailed out one morning and never returned." He slid the box toward Kate. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Among the yellowed pages lay a photograph, Thomas and Bertie by the docks. She recognized the eyes immediately, the same eyes that stared back at her every morning in the mirror. Then she found an unsent letter. "Bertie, I know I was wrong. I cannot come back, yet I cannot forget. I only hope that one day our daughter will understand if I left, it wasn't because I didn't love you. It's because I wasn't worthy." Kate put the letter down, tears spilling freely. "Among the old waves." Before she left, Daniel said quietly, "Some folks claimed they saw him a few years after he went missing up in Nova Scotia. I never knew if it was true, but if you believe it, maybe you should go." Kate turned toward the sea. The blue expanse stretched endlessly, waves rolling as if to hide 1,000 untold secrets. She realized her journey wasn't just about finding the father she'd never met. It was about reclaiming the lost parts of herself. That night, back in her rented room, she wrote in her journal, "I don't know what I'll find. Maybe only a grave, maybe nothing at all. But perhaps this journey isn't about finding him. It's about learning to forgive my mother and myself." The sea speaks. On her way home, Kate stopped at a cliffside overlooking the roaring ocean. She stood there, holding Thomas's letter in her hands. The wind whipped her hair, thick with the scent of salt and mist. Closing her eyes, she let the wind touch her face. And in that moment, she could almost hear a voice rising from the deep, warm, distant, like the whisper of a father who had never held his daughter. "I'm still here, my dear, in the waves, in your heartbeat. Live, and don't be afraid to love." A final tear slipped down her cheek and vanished into the wind. She smiled, not because the pain was gone, but because she finally understood. Sometimes, truth doesn't come to break us, it comes to set us free. We cannot change what has been, but we can choose how to tell it with love, not with sorrow. Chapter 6, Where the Heart Returns. The sun rose slowly on the horizon, its golden veil spreading across the lake. Kate's car wound along the familiar road back to Hart Island, to the old wooden house where everything began. On the seat beside her lay her father's notebook, pages stained with sea salt and time. Each word was the echo of a past that refused to sleep. She thought of Daniel, her brother, her stranger, and his quiet words. "He may be gone, Kate, but his love never was." That thought stayed with her through the long drive home, like a lantern burning in the dark. The house by the lake. When she arrived, the house was just as it had been: faded roof, weathered walls, the old swing swaying gently in the breeze. Bertie sat on the porch, wrapped in a wool blanket, her eyes fixed on the lake that mirrored the evening sky. Kate stepped out of the car. The crunch of gravel made Bertie turn. Their gazes met, no words, no tears, only the quiet understanding that comes after a lifetime of silence. "You're home," Bertie said softly, her voice trembling like the wind. "Yes," Kate whispered. "I went, and I found the things you never said." They sat together in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Only the murmur of the wind through the eaves, the voice of time itself. Words of a father, a mother, and forgiveness. Kate took out Thomas's notebook and laid it gently on the table. "He wrote these for you," she said, "but he never sent them." Bertie opened it slowly. The afternoon light revealed every wrinkle, every shadow carved by years of regret. She read each word carefully. When she reached the line, "I cannot come back, but I cannot forget," tears slid down her cheeks, blurring the ink. "I once wished I'd never met him," she whispered. "But if I hadn't, I wouldn't have had you. And without you, I would never have learned what it means to love imperfectly." Kate clasped her mother's hand. "Mom, I understand now. You and Dad, you were both just trying to survive your pain. None of us were ever bad, just too afraid to speak." Bertie smiled through her tears. "I think I've been waiting my whole life to hear you say that." When hearts beat as one. That afternoon, they cleaned the kitchen together. Bertie wiped the glasses, while Kate opened the windows to let the scent of wildflowers drift in. Everything felt simple and whole. Then, as if destiny had one last surprise, a bus from the mainland pulled up outside. Leela, Kate's teenage daughter, stepped down, her golden hair tousled by the wind, eyes full of worry and wonder. "I couldn't stay home," she said, her voice half child, half grown. "I wanted to know where you went." Kate smiled. "I went to find our family story." Leela looked around, her gaze landing on Bertie, the grandmother she barely knew. A brief hesitation, then Bertie opened her arms. "Come here, sweetheart." Leela walked into the embrace. A simple hug, yet it closed years of distance and silenced the inherited quiet between 3 generations. The last night on the island. That night, the 3 of them sat on the porch, listening to the soft rhythm of waves. Kate told them everything: the harbor town, Daniel, the letters never sent. Bertie listened in silence, sometimes nodding, sometimes turning away to hide her tears. When the story ended, she whispered, "I thought I'd lost everything, but maybe I only lost myself. Thank you, my dear, for finding me again." Leela looked at the 2 women beside her, one who had lived a lifetime of regret and one learning to forgive, and she realized. True love isn't about perfection. It's about staying, even after the pain. The dawn of peace. The next morning, mist floated lazily above the lake. Kate walked to the dock, where her father's old boat still lay moored. She opened his notebook one last time, tore out the page where he'd written of Bertie, the woman I loved but never had the courage to keep. Folding it gently, she let it fall into the water. The paper darkened, softened, and sank slowly out of sight. "I forgive you, Father. I forgive you, Mother. And I forgive myself." A soft breeze swept across the lake, carrying the scent of freedom, the fragrance of things finally released. Bertie stood behind her, a cup of tea in her hand. "Do you know," she said quietly, "this lake used to have another name." Kate turned. "What name?" "When I was young, people called it Heart Lake. They believed if you let go of what hurt you most, the lake would carry the pain away and return peace." Kate smiled gently. "Then today, the lake will carry one more healed heart." The heart still beats. That afternoon, Kate wrote in her journal for the first time in years. No longer the cold notes of duty or schedules, but the honest voice of a woman who had gone full circle to find herself. I've learned that love doesn't always save us from pain. But love, clumsy, flawed, human, is what gives us the courage to keep going. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past. It's choosing to love again, even knowing you might break. Outside, Leela ran along the lakeshore, her laughter echoing in the wind. Bertie sat on the porch, knitting a new scarf, a serene smile on her face. Kate looked at them and knew life would never be perfect. But this moment, right here, was everything she had ever longed for. Epilogue. At sunset, 3 generations, Bertie, Kate, and Leela, stood hand in hand on the wooden pier, watching the sun dip behind the pines. The red glow spread across the lake like fire, but this time, no one felt pain. Because they knew every loss, every regret, every secret had finally been carried away by the sea, the rain, and time itself. Sometimes, to find peace, we don't need to leave. We just need to return to the place where our hearts once broke, and stay until they learn to beat again. Lessons from Broken Hearts Herb. In this world, some wounds never truly disappear. They simply lie quietly within us, waiting for the day they are touched by forgiveness. Heartbroken is not merely a story of loss and family secrets, but a journey of 3 women searching for the true meaning of love, forgiveness, and connection. Bertie spent her life in regret, carrying the heavy weight of the past. Kate grew up in the silence between them, strong to the point of forgetting how to be vulnerable. And Leela, the innocent young girl, became living proof that love, when passed through generations, has the power to heal even the oldest mistakes. In the end, they learned that. Sparkle's forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's the courage to face what once hurt you, so it no longer holds you captive. Sparkle's love isn't always perfect, but its very imperfections teach us compassion and growth. Sparkle's family may break apart, yet it remains the place our hearts long to return to, where we can be ourselves, with all our scars and pain. Perhaps each of us has been a Kate, carrying a shadow inside, a question left unanswered. But only when we dare to return to where we were once hurt can we finally find the light. Love does not save us from pain, but it gives us the courage to keep living. And like Kate, we will come to understand one simple truth. Happiness isn't about forgetting the past. It's about learning to love more deeply after the heart has been broken. Red.
Thank you so much for watching until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to support Elena, storyteller, and stay tuned for the next heartfelt video.